Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a project that I think is core to many of the thrusts of CBMM, though it gets adopted by different ones at different times. So central to the goal of CBMM is to understand how higher order functions of the brain, intelligence, visual intelligence, and social intelligence relate to the structure of the brain, and in particular, how that develops. So to understand it by understanding its origins. And FMRI studies in adults, along with recording in non-human primates, have found amazingly systematic spatial and representational structure in cortex for higher order vision and social cognition. So the key question is, where does this spatial and representational structure come from? How does it develop? And scanning down to the age of 4 or 5 suggests that by the time children are 4 or 5 years old, basically this whole structure is already present. So if we're going to study its earliest moments of development, we have to study it earlier at the time of critical change in human infants. So in my lab, as a first step towards this goal, we've been developing methods doing FMRI in awake human infants while they're watching visual stimuli. We have a custom designed coil, custom sequences, and specially designed stimuli. A key challenge of this work is participant motion, because it's quite hard to explain to a 6-month-old infant, please move even a millimeter. The first key result of this experiment, so for our first experiment, we chose what is basically the first principal component of cortical responses in higher level vision. It's the biggest difference you can measure in human adults, which is the difference between faces and scenes. So we had 9 infants watching movies of faces and scenes. This shows you what to expect from a human adult. And the key question is, what would you see in a 6-month-old baby? I think prior to these results, pretty much any pattern of results is possible, from nothing at all to totally diffuse activation to the most posterior parts, but nothing anterior. What we actually found is that basically every brain region that in adults has a preference for faces or scenes is already present, and with that preference by the time a baby is 6 months old. So astonishingly early spatial and representational organization of cortex. That's key result number 1. Key result number 2, we managed to get 6 of these babies through a second experiment where they were watching not just faces and scenes, but also bodies and objects, which gives us a richer measure of the overall organization of cortex. In adults watching these movies, we can then make what's called a representational similarity matrix, asking how similar does the brain see each category as being to each other category. Since we only have 4 categories, that gives us 6 measurements. And the hotter the color, the more similar the cortical response. This is what it looks like in adults. And this is what it looks like in babies. And by various measures, we can tell that that pattern in babies is different from the pattern in adults. It's also different from the pattern predicted by each of our hypotheses that we went into this experiment with, which suggests that there is major fundamental representational change happening between infants and adults, but we don't know what it is. And so there's lots of work still to be done here. Thanks.